Hey guys! This is a short overview and showcase about the mage skill tree and its build options in Avowed. The typical mage has 3 relevant attributes which are worth investing in. Might is a no-brainer and increases the damage of all your spells by up to 30% at value 50. Intellect increases your maximum essence by 50 points and your elemental resistance by 60 points at max value. The status effect resistance is not that useful, and the max essence bonus is not really needed anymore late in the game, but when you start out it can be worthwhile to invest in intellect and then respec later. While essence regeneration from food is not percentage based, so a high essence doesn't help with that, resting, which you can do anytime your fast travel option is active, does recover 100% of your essence. So at the start of the game, a higher essence bar helps with saving your food and potions during the early hours. Later in the game, when you get access to the blood magic talent, your constitution stat become relevant to help increase your HP as much as possible for casting spells with your HP pool. Since your spells have a cooldown anyway, the action speed increase from dexterity can't be utilized that much. Perception and resolve are completely obsolete because your spells can't crit and don't coast endurance. Therefore, dexterity, perception and resolve are your dump stats. The 2 special pieces of equipment you can utilize as a pure mage are grimoires and wands. Wands are a ranged weapon with some homing properties. Grimoires are an offhand weapon and are exclusive with shields. If you hold the right mouse button, they will show you the embedded spells, which you can also see in the item description. If you cast a spell while holding the right mouse button, you increase the spell by 1 rank and reduce its cost and its cooldown by the value on the grimoire's item tooltip. The animation is the same even if you cast it without holding the right mouse button, but the benefits do only apply when holding it. Tier 1. The base ability for mages is Minor Missles. It's really not worth it, better take Bile Rush or Entangle to spend your first point on, after that you can progress the mage tree. The passive talent on this tier is Armored Grace. It reduces the essence penalty for light armor by 30 points at rank 3. For the points it costs, it's too weak to be considered, and heavy armor is more useful anyway, so it's a complete skip. On this tier we get our first 3 elemental attack spells and 3 utility spells. The attack spells can carry you through Act 1, but will drop heavily in effectivity in comparison when you unlock higher tier spells. The utility spells can be used until the very end of the game. Chill Blades. It creates a stream of ice shards that can instantly freeze most enemies when all shards connect. The damage is okay for a tier 1 single target attack, but its freezing utility can't compare to later area frost spells. The first upgrade causes bleed stack, and its second upgrade makes it pierce enemies in a line, which is only useful if enemies happen to beeline towards you. The second spell is Fan of Flames. This is a channeled AoE cone attack which does, for being a tier 1 spell, good damage and applies burning stacks. The first upgrade level doubles its damage output and the second makes its channel 4 seconds longer. Its only downside is that you are very vulnerable while channeling. The third spell is Jolting Touch. It channels a single beam at a target in front of you, which will then arc to 2 more targets. Its first upgrade will make it hit 5 targets in total, and its last upgrade increases its damage against when only a single target is hit. It causes a little bit of stun on all targets. Its best use case is its ability to stun lock enemies while channeling it, which will most of the time put a pause to all surrounding enemies for 2 seconds. But aside from that, the damage and stun application is very low. It's even not that useful during Act 1. In Tier 1 there are 3 more spells, which are Corrosive Siphon. This powerhouse channels a low damage beam at a single target enemy and heals you while doing so. Its first upgrade stuns almost every enemy during the channel duration and locks them in place. Its second upgrade lets all overhealing you do create a shield for around 20 seconds with a maximum shield amount equal to your maximum HP. Its healing scales with the damage you do, but not with the HP you have, so having a high amount of HP benefits the amount of healing you can collect and store in the form of an overshield, but not its efficiency. This spell is incredibly useful throughout the game for all classes. Since it's tier 1, it can easily be taken by anyone without the need to cast it from a spellbook, since its cost and its cooldown are low enough baseline. Its only downsides are the amount of undead enemies in the game that completely nullify the spell, and the massive amount of food you can collect, which can handle all the healing by itself. Parasitic Staff. This spell creates a two-handed weapon which regenerates a little bit of essence with each strike and has a good stun build-up. Its first upgrade makes its heavy attacks create a magic area blast which causes a little bit of stun and regenerates essence for every enemy hit. Its second upgrade makes it last 45 seconds. Many weapons you will find are stronger, and its mana drain ability is at some point replaced with foot or blood magic. It's fun to play around with and it has its use cases early game, but all in all it's not so useful. Arcane Veil. This is one of the most useful spells from the very first moment till the bitter end. It gives you 25% damage reduction and makes your spells uninterruptible. Its first upgrade makes you reflect arrows, but not spells, preventing all damage they do. Its second upgrade makes enemy knock back when they hit you. The first upgrade prevents so much damage against archers it's not funny anymore. Especially early to mid-game, this spell can make many battles manageable, which you would struggle without it. Its second upgrade is not really that useful though. Tier 2. On the second tier, we learn the 3 passive skills that work with wands. The first one is Blast, which creates an explosion around the target of every heavy wand attack. It upgrades increase the damage and stun surrounding enemies take. The second one is Bounce, and it makes heavy wand attacks chain from enemy to up to 2 additional targets at max rank, and the last passive increases wand damage by up to 50%. Wands without these perks are incredibly weak weapons, but with these perks applied they become absolutely mass stunning monsters. The overlapping area stun explosion can lock down an entire area. But even then they are not that extreme when it comes to damage numbers. And 6 to 9 talent points, depending if you want to include the damage upgrade, is a massive investment. It's an interesting playstyle, but you are missing out on a lot of damage against the big guys. The other passive talent is Grimoire MAstery. It reduces the spell cost of all spells you cast from Grimoires even further by up to 20%, stacking additively with other sources, and unlocks the ability to spend talent points on these nodes. So it's a required talent for a mage. You learn 3 elemental attack spells on this tier and 2 utility spells. Blizzard. This is a big area frost spell which does damage over a period of 3 seconds. Its first upgrade reduces the casting time to almost an instant, which is very useful, and the second increases the duration to 9 seconds, which triples its damage output. While the damage over a period of 9 seconds is high, its cooldown only starts after the spell ends, which makes it less spammable than its counterparts on the same tier, making it damage-wise weaker overall, but its freezing capabilities are useful nonetheless. So if you only have the talent points to invest in 1 or 2 spells, its lightning and fire sister spells are more useful to invest in. But if you have more points to spare, it's a useful spell. Fireball. This spell is an exploding projectile which does good damage in a small area. Its first upgrade increases its area by a lot, and its second upgrade reduces its cooldown significantly. This is probably the most all-around useful spell that you can get early on. It's available during Act 1 as early as you can equip the Grimoire of Elements and upgradable from level 5 on. It even does moderate damage versus single targets up to late game and is incredibly spammable. It causes a lot of fire accumulation. It leaves behind a burning ground which causes even more damage in fire status. If you only have a few talent points, its spammability makes it a prime candidate for this situation. It pairs good with a wand because the wand can stun the enemies while they burn slowly to death, and the low cooldown let you skip on other spells aside from that one, freeing you of more points for your wand attacks. Crackling Bolt. This attack creates a jumping spark that bounces off multiple enemies or from the environment until it flies off too far away or reaches its maximum bounces. It can be upgraded to bounce up to 8 times. It does a little bit of stun damage as well. If you come into a situation where you only have 1 to 2 targets, it performs above its tier level. When more enemies are stacked together, Fireball is stronger. Since its bounces will often hit enemies that are trying to hold distance to the melee attackers, it even outperforms Fireball against spread out groups. Fireball and Crackling Bolt work well in conjunction with each other since they are applying different elements and can fix the resistance and target formation holes of the other spell. If you can't take both, it's a hard decision between these two. You can't go wrong with either one. Bristling Frost. It reduces damage by 10% and causes frost accumulation on enemy melee attackers. Its first upgrade makes it create frost bursts around you when you are hit, and its second upgrade increases its damage reduction to 15% and reduces its cooldown by 5 seconds. It's a useful spell that stacks well with the Arcane Veil spell. But to get everything out of it, you have to engage enemies in melee, and it doesn't stack as well with other frost spells. You don't need that much frost application. Frozen enemies don't attack you in melee and doesn't trigger your frost shield. Blast attacks instantly end frost status and create a small extra damage burst area. If you're utilizing frost element status, be aware that using blast attacks transforms frost element in a damaging effect that is mostly only useful against stacked enemies, while non-blast attacks allow the target to be frozen for longer. Grimoire Snap. A radial blast attack with low damage and a bit of knockback and stun. Its upgrade levels increase the knockback significantly and allow the damage portion of the spell to affect multiple targets. In my opinion, it's too weak to invest any points into it, and without investing points, it loses its utility value. All in all, not very useful. Tier 3. Blood Magic. This is the first passive from this tier. This talent is a game changer. It allows you to cast all your spells, if you don't have enough essence, from your HP pool with an increased cost. Now you can completely ignore intellect or essence increases on items and go for heavy armor and more health. The other thing is that it pretty much doubles your regeneration from foot items, since you are now regenerating essence and health for casting at the same time. The only thing you shouldn't do is using high-level spells without leveled grimoires. That will hurt and will put you in danger in more difficult fights. 1 point is enough if you have a big health pool. Harvest Essence. The regeneration from this talent is conditional and costs too many points for 2 less, not worth a single point. You learn 3 elemental and 1 force spell as damage and stunning tools at this tier. Blast of Frost. This is a Frost variant of Fan of Flames. They are practically identical, even in their upgrades. The Frost variant is much safer to use, since it had massive Frost accumulation, as well as almost 4 times the damage output. This spell is a reliable powerhouse and stays useful till the last second of the game. Ring of Fire. This is a fire variant of Ring of Frost. It's almost exactly the same. It has 5% more damage reduction though, and fire is a worse defensive element for protecting you in melee. It can't be active at the same time as Ring of Frost, making it the inferior choice when it comes to its defensive status effect application. The 5% more damage reduction could be worth taking if you can achieve high numbers of damage reduction and all numbers would stack additively. But I couldn't test this properly in time, and it's definitely not needed to finish the game, so it's a pass in my book. Returning Storm. This is the strongest lightning spell in the game. At first, it causes unimpressive numbers, but its upgrades are very powerful. The first one makes enemy unable to move for 4 seconds. This is useful, but not amazing. But its last upgrade makes us cast lightning bolts like a machine gun. Every lightning bolt does good stun and damage. This spell wrecks bosses mid-game and stun locks entire groups of enemies during its duration. It stays powerful till the end. It has a long cooldown though, and if you have the choice between only this and Blast of Frost, then Blast of Frost would be the more useful all-in-one tool. But it's incredible as an additional spell to take. Spirit Lance. This spell is a bigger brother of Parasitic Staff. It summons a one-handed spear. You can still use your shield or your book while using this. It doesn't have the leeching properties of the staff. Instead, with its first upgrade, its heavy attack causes a damage explosion that staggers everything around your target. It can stun lock entire groups if you chain heavy attacks. The damage from its explosion seems to be a high percentage of your direct heavy attack damage, doing always a lot more damage to your area targets than your main focus target. This spell requires a very specific build to get everything out of it, but then it works very well. It scales with crit and one-handed spear passive talents. Missles Salvo. This is a force damage spell. It's very similar to Returning Storm, but it only hits a single target and it lacks in power. It upgrades increases its rate of fire of magic missiles, and when the spell ends it will track a single target with a big stunning missile. Like all force damage effects, it's very underwhelming. Skip it. Tier 4. The 4 elemental passives here increase your elemental accumulation. This is useless since all abilities that do relevant elemental accumulation are already so good at it that they won't benefit from these. And increased accumulation does not increase the effectiveness of status effects. And since status effects by itself are not very strong, it's an easy skip. Pillar of Ice. This creates a very strong damaging and freezing ice area attack. Its upgrade creates a destructible object on its point of impact which can be destroyed for a bit of explosion damage. If you manage to keep it alive, it will permanently apply more frost status. Its second upgrade reduces its essence cost by 25%. The essence cost reduction stacks with your Grimoire and the Sigil of Arcane Ring additively, reducing the cost of your spell to almost nothing. Very strong burst spell which also freezes everything. The only downside is that it's too costly without a Grimoire. Blackbow. Another summon weapon. It creates a high damage acid applying bow. Its first upgrade make it pierce through multiple enemies, which is only situational useful, and its second upgrade make it last for 45 seconds. It generally works with bow passives Pull of Eora. This is a pure CC spell that can lift most enemies for 12 seconds into the air. Its upgrades make it hit up to 4 enemies. It's useful, but most of the time the points invested here would be better invested into more damage. Tier 5 Meteor Shower. It creates an area where fire projectiles fall randomly to the ground. Enemies hit take roughly under half the damage of a fireball. With its first upgrade, the projectiles leave behind a lingering burning ground. Its last upgrade works like essence reduction from Pillars of Frost. Its cooldown is extremely long. In most cases, due to enemy movement, the projectiles will only hit enemies 1 to 2 times, making the spell on average not much more useful than a single cast fireball. Multiple burning ground stacks, so sometimes it can cause massive damage. Rooting enemies before casting this increases its average damage by a metric ton. All in all, the most unreliable of the 3 elemental top tier spells if you don't root the enemies beforehand. Arcane Seal. It creates a zone that regenerates your mana. Its upgrade increases your cast speed while standing inside, and the second upgrade creates a slowing field. The cooldown is extremely long. By the time you get that spell, you don't need any more help with mana regeneration. The slow effect is not that great because the circle is too small to be really effective at CC. Don't worth 3 points would have been useful early in the game. These are all the talents on the mage skill tree. The Arcane Veil spell, Corrosive Siphon and Bristling Frost are easy enough to acquire that they can be utilized for all types of character builds and without Grimoires. The elemental damage spells are really made cost and cooldown wise for use in conjunction with a Grimoire, which limits effective spell combinations to the ones that are present as Grimoires in the game. From the summoned weapons, only the Spirit Lance is really useful as a high rate caster melee weapon because of its overpowered area damage when used with all the passive spear talents and crit options. The Arcane Seal and Pull of Eora as utility tools are too far down the talent tiers and therefore too expensive and cooldown heavy to be utilized without a Grimoire. And your Grimoire slot is more useful for damage spells, and they cost too much talent points to even acquire them to be used by a weapon-focused character, aside from Spirit Lance builds. That reduces build options to 1. Elemental Grimoire attack users, 2. Wand users, 3. Spirit Lance attackers, and the Blood Magic, Arcane Veil, Corrosive Siphon and Bristling Frost as utility options. This was my take on the mage talent tree. What are your thoughts on the mage talents? Thank you guys for watching. If you like that content, please subscribe and have a good time. See you later.